Hi, welcome back to Storytime. I am Sunny, of course, and we are currently reading The Secret of Chimneys by Agatha Christie. And we are probably by the end of this, we'll be about halfway through. Hey, Maestro, you want to come join me? And if we're lucky, Maestro might come join us. Maestro is my kitty boy. He's this guy right here. And when I have this little image of my little tuxedo beauty up, that means that I'm chatting before or between chapters or afterwards. So if you're watching on the VODs or on the YouTube video, then you can just, and you don't want to hear like all the chat stuff, you can just switch to when I make him disappear, and then I'll be reading the story. So I think we're going to actually go ahead and get started now. So let me go ahead and hide him, and we'll jump right into it. And by the way, before I start, hello, how are you doing? Yeah. These are my cats. Maestro is the tuxedo one. Oh, thank you so much for the follow. Dot and Benjamin. Or not, I'm sorry, not Dop. There we go. These are my cats, so Maestro is the tuxedo one. I do most of my art is him, just because tuxedos are a lot easier to draw than tabbies, but like my webcam frame has both Maestro and Snockings. And if we're lucky, maybe they'll come join us. Maestro is just sitting over there, just kind of... Are you being sulky, or are you just hanging out waiting for me to start story time? He actually likes being read to, which, you know, it's perfect for me. And you can see in my points redeemed thing that I do have some, like, giving Maestro a treat, giving Snockings a treat. Now that I do have a webcam, though, again, I might start doing, like, brushing Maestro's fur or nuzzling with Snockings, who has buried herself in my bed right now. So yes, we'll go ahead and get started. If you are all set, here we go. Chapter 13, The American Visitor. Superintendent Battle replaced the sheet with the slightly crestfallen air of a man whose best point has fallen flat. Anthony stood with his hands in his pocket, lost in thought. So that's what old Lollipop meant when he talked about other means, he murmured at last. I beg your pardon, Mr. McCade? Nothing, Superintendent. Forgive my abstraction. You see, or rather my friend, Jimmy McGrath, has been very neatly done out of £1,000. £1,000 is a nice sum of money, said Battle. It isn't £1,000 so much, said Anthony, though I agree with you that it's a nice sum of money. It's being done that maddens me. I handed over that manuscript like a little woolly lamb. It hurts, Superintendent. Indeed, it hurts. The detective said nothing. Well, well, said Anthony. Regrets are vain, and all may not yet be lost. I've only got to get a hold of dear old Stilpditch's reminiscences between now and next Wednesday, and all will be gas and gaiters. Would you mind coming back to the council chamber, Mr. Cade? There's one little thing I want to point out to you. Back in the council chamber, the detective strode at once to the middle window. I've been thinking, Mr. Cade, this particular window is very stiff indeed. You might have been mistaken in thinking that it was fastened. It might just have stuck. I'm almost sure you were mistaken. Anthony eyed him keenly. And supposing I say that I'm quite sure I was not? Don't you think you could have been? Said Battle, looking at him very steadily. Thank you very much. Yes, I had a lot of fun making the emotes. That was the thing I was the most excited about with Affiliate, that I got to start creating my own emotes. Oh, and I keep forgetting that I can use... Oh, I guess I don't have that as a thing. All the tiaras that I wear... Actually, let me put up Maestro really quickly. all of the tiaras that I wear on the stream for about 13 or so years. I used to wear them every single day when I was working at, well, I still do work at the bookstore. I work at an independent bookstore. And it's just something I did every day for whatever reason. But I had to stop I had to stop keeping them in a place where I would easily remember, and so I forgot, and then I just sort of fell out of the habit. But I'm like, story time, I'm bringing back the tiaras. So this particular one, it's kind of hard to see. There we go. It is an inside out umbrella, and I was actually inspired by this insane storm that we were having. Just rain almost going sideways. And one of my coworkers was like, "You need to have a rain tiara." And I'm like, "I do." And I pointed to my cheery rainbow and a cheery little rain cloud. And she's like, no, this type of rain. So this was inspired by her. Yes. Oh, and I forgot to put up. There we go. This is the link to all of my socials, where, of course, an hour before I go live, I will let people know via Twitter and Discord when I'm going to be streaming. April's schedule is going to be Friday and Sunday, 2 to 4. And currently we're reading, of course, Agatha Christie's Secret of Chimneys. And then next, I'm not sure, I was thinking of doing Secret Agent. Sorry, I keep wanting to say Secret Adversary, but that's what we read last time. But I'll probably have a poll. And then all of my story times I put on YouTube, and they're all in playlist form, so you don't have to worry about finding the next one in, in the order. So, yeah. Anyways, that's my little sort of introduction. But here we go. We'll get back to it. "Don't you think you could have been?" said Battle, looking at him very steadily. "Well, to oblige you, Superintendent, yes." Battle smiled in a satisfied fashion. "You quicken the uptake, sir, and you'll have no objection to saying so, careless-like, at a suitable moment?" "None whatever. He paused as Battle gripped his arm. The superintendent was bent forward, listening. Enjoying silence on Anthony was a gesture. He tiptoed noiselessly to the door and flung it suddenly open. On the threshold stood a tall man with black hair neatly parted in the middle, china-blue eyes with a particularly innocent expression, and a large, placid face. "Your pardon, gentlemen," he said in a slow, drawling voice, with a pronounced transatlantic accent, "but it is permitted to inspect the scene of the crime. I take it that you are both gentlemen from Scotland Yard?" I have not that honor," said Anthony, "but this gentleman is Superintendent Battle of Scotland Yard." "Is that so?" said the American gentleman, with a great appearance of interest. "Pleased to meet you, sir. My name is Hiram P. Fish, of New York City." "What was it you wanted to see, Mr. Fish?" asked the detective. The American walked gently into the room and looked with much interest at the dark patch on the floor. "I am interested in crime, Mr. Battle. It is one of my hobbies. I have contributed a monograph to one of our weekly periodicals on the subject, Degeneracy and the Criminal." As he spoke, his eyes went gently round the room, seeming to note everything in it. They rested just a shade longer on the window. "The body," said Superintendent Battle, stating a self-evident fact, "has been removed." "Surely," said Mr. Fish. His eyes went to the paneled walls. "Some remarkable pictures in this room, gentlemen. A Holbein, 2 Van Dycks, and, if I'm not mistaken, a Velasquez. I am interested in pictures, and likewise in first editions. It was to see this first edition that Lord Caterham was so kind as to invite me down here." He sighed gently. "I guess that's all off now. It would show proper feeling. It would show a proper feeling, I suppose, for the guests to return to town immediately." "I'm afraid that can't be done, sir," said Superintendent Battle. "Nobody must leave the house until after the inquest." "Is that so? And when is the inquest?" Maybe tomorrow, may not be until Monday. We've got to arrange for the autopsy and see the coroner. I get you, said Mr. Fish. Under circumstances, though, it will be a melancholy party. Battle led the way to the door. We'd best get out of here, he said. We're keeping it locked still. He waited for the other two to pass through, and then turned the key and removed it. I opine, said Mr. Fish, that you are seeking for fingerprints? Maybe, said the superintendent laconically. I should say so, that on a night such as last night, an intruder would have left fingerprints on the hardwood floor. None inside, plenty outside. Mine? Explained Anthony cheerfully. The innocent eyes of Mr. Fish swept over him. Young man, he said, you surprise me. They turned a corner and came out into the big, wide hall, paneled like the council chamber in old oak and with a wide gallery above it. Two other figures came into sight at the far end. Aha, said Mr. Fish, our genial host. This was such a ludicrous description of Lord Caterham that Anthony had to turn his head away to conceal a smile. And with him, continued the American, is a lady whose name I did not catch last night, but she is bright. She is very bright. With Lord Caterham was Virginia Revel. Anthony had been anticipating this meeting all along. He had no idea how to act. He must leave it to Virginia. Although he had full confidence in her presence of mind, he had not the slightest idea what line she would take. He was not long left in doubt. Why, it's Mr. Cade, said Virginia. She held out both hands to him. So you found you could come down after all. Well, my dear Mrs. Revel, I had no idea Mr. Cade was a friend of yours, said Lord Caterham. He's a very old friend, said Virginia, smiling at Anthony with a mischievous glint in her eye. I ran across him in London unexpectedly yesterday and told him I was coming down here. Anthony was quick to give her a pointer. I explained to Mrs. Revel, he said, that I had been forced to refuse your kind invitation, since it had really been extended to quite a different man, and I couldn't very well foist a perfect stranger on you under false pretenses. Well, well, my dear fellow, said Lord Caterham, that's all over and done with now. I'll send down to the cricketers for your bag. It's very kind of you, Lord Caterham, but nonsense. Of course you must come to Chimneys. Horrible place, the cricketers, to stay in, I mean. Of course you must come, Mr. McCade, said Virginia softly. Anthony realized the altered tone of his surroundings. Already Virginia had done much for him. He was no longer an ambiguous stranger. Her position was so assured and unassailable that anyone for whom she vouched was accepted as a matter of course. He thought of the pistol in the tree at Burnham Beeches and smiled inwardly. I'll send for your traps, said Lord Caterham to Anthony. I suppose, in the circumstances, we can't have any shooting. Pity, but there it is. And I don't know what the devil to do with Isaac Stein. It's all very unfortunate. The depressed peer heavily sighed. That's settled, then, said Virginia. You can begin to be useful right away, Mr. Cade, and take me out on the lake. It's very peaceful there, and far from crime and all that sort of thing. Isn't it awful of poor Lord Caterham having a murder done in his house? But it's George's fault, really. This is George's party, you know. Aha, said Lord Caterham. But I should never have listened to him. He assumed the air of a strong man betrayed by a single weakness. One can't help listening to George, said Virginia. He always holds you so that you can't get away. I'm thinking of patenting a detachable lapel. I wish you would, chuckled her host. I'm glad you're coming to us, Cade. I need support. I appreciate your kindness very much, Lord Caterham, said Anthony. Especially, he added, when I'm such a suspicious character, but my staying here makes it easier for battle. In what way, sir? Asked the superintendent. You won't be so difficult to keep an eye on me, exclaimed Anthony gently. And by the momentary flicker of the superintendent's eyelids, he knew that his shot had gone home. Chapter 14. Mainly political and financial. Except for that involuntary twitch of the eyelids, Superintendent Battle's impassivity was unimpaired. If he had been surprised at Virginia's recognition of Anthony, he did not show it. He and Lord Caterham stood together and watched those two go out through the garden door. Mr. Fish also watched them. "Nice young fellow, that," said Lord Caterham. "Very nice for Mrs. Revell to meet an old friend," murmured the American. "They have been acquainted some time, presumably?" "Seems so," said Lord Caterham, "but I've never heard her mention him before. Oh, by the way, Battle, Mr. Lomax has been asking for you. He's in the blue morning room." "Very good, Lord Caterham. I'll go there at once." Battle found his way to the blue morning room without difficulty. He was already familiar with the geography of the house. "Ah, there you are, Battle," said Lomax. He was striding impatiently up and down the carpet. There was one other person in the room, a big man sitting in a chair by the fireplace. He was dressed in a very correct English shooting clothes, which nevertheless sat strangely upon him. He had a fat yellow face and black eyes, and as impenetrable as those of a cobra. There was a generous curve to the big nose, and power in the square lines of his vast jaw. "Come in, Battle," said Lomax irritably, "and shut the door behind you. This is Mr. Hiram Isaacstein." Battle inclined his head respectfully. He knew all about Mr. Herman, not Hiram. He knew all about Mr. Herman Isaacstein, and though the great financier sat there silent, whilst Lomax strode up and down and talked, he knew who was the real power in the room. "We can speak more freely now," said Lomax. "For Lord Caterham and Colonel Melrose, I was anxious not to say too much. You understand, Battle? These things mustn't get about." "Ah," said Battle, "but they always do, there's the pity." Just for a second he saw a trace of a smile on the fat yellow face. It disappeared as suddenly as it had come. "Now what do you really think of this young fellow, this Anthony Cade?" continued George. "Do you still assume him to be innocent?" Battle shrugged his shoulders very slightly. "He tells a strange story. Part of it we shall be able to verify. On the fact of it, it counts for his presence here last night. I shall cable to South Africa, of course, for information about his antecedents." "Then you regard him as cleared of all complicity?" Battle raised a large square hand. "Not so fast, sir. I never said that." "What is your idea about the crime, Superintendent Battle?" asked Isaacstein, speaking for the first time. His voice was deep and rich, and had a certain compelling quality about it. It had stood him in good stead at board meetings in his younger day. "It's rather too soon to have any ideas, Mr. Isaacstein. I have not got beyond asking myself the first question." "What is that?" "Oh, it's always the same. Motive. Who benefits by the death of Prince Michael? We've got to answer that before we can get anywhere." "The Revolutionary Party of Czechoslovakia," began George. Superintendent Battle waved him aside with something less than his usual respect. "It wasn't the Comrades of the Red Hand, sir, if you're thinking of them." "But the paper, with the scarlet hand on it, put there to suggest the obvious solution." George's dignity was a little ruffled. "Really, Battle, I don't see how you can be sure of that." "Bless you, Mr. Lomax. We know all about the Comrades of the Red Hand. We've had our eye on them ever since Prince Michael landed in England. That sort of thing is the elementary work of the department. They'd never be allowed to get within a mile of him." "I agree with Superintendent Battle," said Isaacstein. "We must look elsewhere." "You see, sir," said Battle, encouraged by this support, "we do know a little about the case. If we don't know who gains by his death, we do know who loses by it." "Meaning?" said Isaacstein. His black eyes were bent upon the detective. More than ever he reminded Battle of a hooded cobra. "You mean Mr. Lomax, not to mention the Loyalist Party of Czechoslovakia. If you'll pardon the expression, sir, you're in the soup." "Really, Battle," interposed George, shocked to the core. "Go on, Battle," said Isaacstein. In the soup describes the situation very accurately. You are an intelligent man. You've got to have a king. You've lost your king. Like that. He snapped his large fingers. You've got to find another in a hurry, and that's not an easy job. Now, I don't want to know the details of your scheme. The bare outline is enough for me, but I take it it's a big deal? Isaac Stein bent his head slowly. It's a very big deal. That brings me to my second question. Who is the next heir to the throne of Czechoslovakia? Isaac Stein looked across at Lomax. The latter answered the question with a certain reluctance and a good deal of hesitation. That would be, I should say, yes, it is, in all probability, Prince Nicholas would be the next heir. Aha, said Battle. And who is Prince Nicholas? First cousin of Prince Michael's. Ah, said Battle. I should like to hear all about Prince Nicholas, especially where he is at present. Nothing much is known of him, said Lomax. As a young man, he was most peculiar in his ideas, consorted with socialists and republicans, and acted in a highly unbecoming to his position. By the way, Republicans in this isn't really what we consider, at least in America, as Republicans. They are more like the people who are interested in the rights of the republic as opposed to the monarchy. So, interesting. I had to get used to that when I was reading Scarlet Pimpernel. He was talking about the Republicans, which were, the common folk who were rising up against the aristocracy. It was very interesting using terminology that changes throughout the eras. Nothing much is known of him, said Lomax. As a young man, he was most peculiar in his ideas, consorted with socialists and republicans, and acted in a way highly unbecoming of his position. He was sent down from Oxford, I believe, for some wild escapade. There was a rumor of his death 2 years later in the Congo, but it was only a rumor. He turned up a few months ago when news of the royalist reaction got about. Indeed, said Battle. Where did he turn up? In America. America! Battle turned to Isaac Stein with one laconic word. Oil? The financier nodded. He represents that if the Czechoslovakians choose a king, they would prefer him to Prince Michael, as being more in sympathy with modern enlightened ideas, and he draws attention to his early democratic views and his sympathy with republican ideals. In return for financial support, he was prepared to grant concessions to a certain group of American financiers. Superintendent Battle so far forgot his habitual impassivity as to give vent to a prolonged whistle. So that is it, he muttered. In the meantime, the Loyalist party supported Prince Michael, and you felt sure you'd come out on top. And then this happens. You surely don't think, began George. It was a big deal, said Battle. His Isaac Stein said so, and I should say that what he calls a big deal is a big deal. There are always unscrupulous tools to be got hold of, said Isaac Stein quietly. For the moment, Wall Street wins, but they've not done with me yet. Find out who killed Prince Michael, Superintendent Battle, if you want to do your country a service. One thing strikes me as highly suspicious, put in George Lomax. Why did the equerry, Captain Andrassy, not come down with the prince yesterday? I've inquired into that, said Battle. It's perfectly simple. He stayed in town to make arrangements with a certain lady on behalf of Prince Michael for next weekend. The Baron rather frowned on such things, thinking them injudicious at the present stage of affairs, so His Highness had to go about them in a hole-and-corner manner. He was, if I may say so, inclined to be a rather dissipated young man. I'm afraid so, said George ponderously. Yes, I'm afraid so. There's one other point we ought to take into account, I think, said Battle, speaking with a certain amount of hesitation. King Victor's supposed to be in England. King Victor? Lomax frowned in an effort at recollection. Notorious French crook, sir. We've had a warning from the Sûreté in Paris. Of course, said George. I remember now. Jewel thief, isn't he? Why, that's the man. He broke off abruptly. Eisenstein, who had been following abstractedly at the fireplace, who had been frowning abstractedly at the fireplace, looked up just too late to catch the warning glance telegraphed from Superintendent Battle to the other, but being a man sensitive to vibrations in the atmosphere, he was conscious of a sense of strain. You don't want me any longer, do you, Lomax? He inquired. No, thank you, my dear fellow. Would it upset your plans if I returned to London, Superintendent Battle? I'm afraid so, sir, said the superintendent civilly. You see, if you go, there will be others who will want to go also, and that would never do. Quite so. The great financier left the room, closing the door behind him. Splendid fellow, Eisenstein, murmured George Lomax perfunctorily. Very powerful personality, agreed Superintendent Battle. George began to pace up and down again. What you say disturbs me greatly, he began. King Victor? I thought he was in prison. Came out a few months ago. French police meant to keep on his heels, but he managed to give them the slip straight away. He would, too. One of the coolest customers that ever lived. For some reason or other, they believed he is in England and have notified us to that effect. But what should he be doing in England? That's for you to say, sir, said Battle significantly. You mean, you think... You know the story, of course. Yes, I can see you do. I was not in office, of course, at the time, but I heard the whole story from the late Lord Caterham in Unparalleled Catastrophe. The Koh-i-Noor, said Battle reflectively. Hush, Battle! George glanced suspiciously round him. I beg of you, mention no names. Much better not. If you must speak of it, call it the K. The superintendent looked wooden again. You don't connect King Victor with this crime, do you, Battle? Oh, it's just a possibility, that's all. If you cast your mind back, sir, you will remember that there were 4 places where a certain royal visitor might have concealed the jewel. Chimneys was one of them. King Victor was arrested in Paris 3 days after the disappearance, if I may call it that, of the K. It was always hoped that he would some day lead us to the jewel. But Chimneys has been ransacked and overhauled a dozen times. Yes, said Battle sapiently, but it's never much good looking when you don't know where to look. Only suppose now that this King Victor came here to look for the king, was surprised by Prince Michael, and shot him. It's possible, said George. A most likely solution for the crime. I wouldn't go as far as that. It's possible, but not much more. Why is that? Because King Victor has never been known to take a life, said Battle seriously. Oh, but a man like that, a dangerous criminal. But Battle shook his head in a dissatisfied manner. Criminals always act true to type, Mr. Lomax. It's surprising. All the same. Yes. I'd rather like to question the prince's servant. I've left him purposefully to the last. We'll have him in here, sir, if you don't mind. George signified his assent. The superintendent rang the bell. Treadwell answered it and departed with his instructions. He returned shortly, accompanied by a tall, fair man with high cheekbones, a very deep-set blue eyes, and an impassivity of countenance which almost rivaled Battle's. Boris Anchukov. Yeah. Yes? You were valet to Prince Michael? I was His Highness' valet, yes. He spoke good English, though with a markedly harsh foreign accent. You know that your master was murdered last night? A deep snarl, like the snarl of a wild beast, was the man's only answer. It alarmed George, who withdrew prudently towards the window. When did you see your master last? His Highness retired to bed at 10:30. I slept, as always, in the antechamber next to him. He must have gone down to the room downstairs by the other door, the door that gave on the corridor. I did not hear him go. It may be that I was drugged. I have been an unfaithful servant. I slept while my master woke. I am cursed. George gazed at him, fascinated. You loved your master, eh? Said Battle, watching the man closely. Boris' features contracted painfully. He swallowed twice. Then his voice came, harsh with emotion. I say this to you, English policeman. I would have died for him. And since he is dead and I still live, my eyes shall not know sleep, or my heart rest until I have avenged him. Like a dog I will nose out this murderer, and when I have discovered it... Ah! His eyes lit up. Suddenly he drew an immense knife from beneath his coat and brandished it aloft. Not all at once will I kill him. Oh, no. First I will slit his nose, and cut off his ears, and put out his eyes, and then into his black heart I will thrust this knife. Swiftly he replaced the knife, and turning, left the room. George Lomax, his eyes always protuberant, but now goggling almost out of his head, stared at the closed door. Pure bed for the Slovakian, of course, he muttered. Most uncivilized people, a race of brigands. Superintendent Battle rose alertly to his feet. Either that man's sincere, he remarked, or he is the best bluffer I've ever seen. And if it's the former, God help Prince Michael's murderer when that human bloodhound gets hold of him. Oh, I love this tea. It's Lady Grey. It's so lovely. Chapter 15. The French Stranger. Virginia and Anthony walked side by side down the path which led to the lake. For some minutes after leaving the house they were silent. It was Virginia who broke the silence at last with a little laugh. Oh, dear, she said. Isn't it dreadful? Here I am so bursting with the things I want to tell you and the thing I want to know that I simply don't know where to begin. First of all, she lowered her voice, what have you done with the body? How awful it sounds, doesn't it? I never dreamt that I should be so steeped in crime. I suppose it's quite a novel sensation for you, agreed Anthony. But not for you? Well, I've never disposed of a corpse before, certainly. Tell me about it. Briefly and succinctly, Anthony ran over the steps he had taken on the previous night. Virginia listened attentively. I think you were very clever, she said approvingly when he had finished. I can pick up the trunk again when I go back to Paddington. The only difficulty that might arise is if you had given an account of where you were yesterday evening. I can't see that can arise. The body can't be found until late last night, or possibly this morning. Otherwise, there would have been something about it in those morning papers. And whatever you may imagine from reading detective stories, doctors aren't much magicians that they can tell you exactly how many hours a man has been dead. The exact time of death will be pretty vague. An alibi for last night would be far more to the point. I know. Lord Caterham was telling me all about it. But the Scotland Yard man is quite convinced of your innocence now, isn't he? Anthony did not reply at once. He doesn't look particularly astute, continued Virginia. I don't know about that, said Anthony slowly. I have an impression that there are no flies on Superintendent Battle. He appears to be convinced of my innocence, but I'm not so sure. He's stumped at present by my apparent lack of motive. Apparent, said Virginia. But what possible reason could you have for murdering an unknown foreign count? Anthony darted a sharp glance at her. You were at one time or other in Czechoslovakia, weren't you? He asked. Yes, I was there with my husband for 2 years at the embassy. That was just before the assassination of the king and queen. Did you ever run across Prince Michael Obolovich? Michael? Of course I did. Horrible little wretch. He suggested, I remember, that I should marry him morganatically. Did he really? And what did he suggest you should do about your existing husband? Oh, he had a sort of David and Uriah scheme all made out. And how did you respond to this amiable offer? Well, said Virginia, unfortunately one had to be diplomatic, so poor little Michael didn't get it as straight from the shoulder as he might have done. But he retired hurt all the same. Why all this interest about Michael? Something I'm getting at in my own blundering fashion. I take it that you didn't meet the murdered man? No. To put it like a book, he retired to his own apartments immediately upon arrival. And of course you haven't seen the body? Virginia, eyeing him with a good deal of interest, shook her head. Could you get to see it, do you think? By means of influence in high places, meaning Lord Caterham, I dare say I could. Why, is it in order? Good Lord, no, said Anthony, horrified. Have I been as dictatorial as all that? No, it's simply this. Count Stanislaus was the incognito of Prince Michael of Czechoslovakia. Virginia's eyes opened very wide. I'm sorry. I see. Suddenly her face broke into its fascinated, one-sided smile. I hope you won't suggest that Michael went to his rooms simply to avoid seeing me. Something of the kind, admitted Anthony. You see, if I'm right in my mind that someone wanted to prevent your coming to Chimneys, the reason seems to lie in your knowing Czechoslovakia. Do you realize that you're the only person here who knew Prince Michael by the sight? Do you mean that this man who was murdered was an impostor? Asked Virginia abruptly. That is the possibility that crossed my mind. If you can get Lord Caterham to show you the body, we can clear up that point at once. Well, he was shot at 11:45, said Virginia thoughtfully. The time mentioned on that scrap of paper. The whole thing's horribly mysterious. That reminds me, is that your window up there, the second from the end over council chamber? No, my room is on the Elizabethan wing, the other side. Why? Simply because I walked away last night after thinking I heard a shot. The light went up in that room. How curious. I don't know who has that room, but I can find out by asking Bundle. Perhaps they heard the shot. If so, they haven't come forward to say so. I understood from Battle that nobody in the house heard the shot fired. It's the only clue of any kind that I've got, and I dare say it's a pretty rotten one. But I mean to follow it up for what it's worth. It's curious, certainly, said Virginia thoughtfully. They had arrived at Boathouse by the lake, and had been leaning against it as they talked. And now for the whole story, said Anthony. We'll paddle gently about on the lake, secure from the prying ears of Scotland Yard, American visitors, and curious housemaids. I've heard something from Lord Caterham, said Virginia. Not nearly enough. To begin with, which are you really, Anthony Cade or Jimmy McGrath? For the second time that morning, Anthony unfolded his history for the last 6 weeks of his life, with this difference that the account given to Virginia needed no editing. He finished up with his own astonished recognition of Mr. Holmes. By the way, Mrs. Revell, he ended, I've never thanked you for imperiling your mortal soul by saying that I was an old friend of yours. Of course you're an old friend, cried Virginia. You don't suppose I'd lumber you with a corpse and then pretend you were a mere acquaintance next time I met you? No, indeed. She paused. Do you know one thing that strikes me about all this? She went on. That there's some extra mystery about those memoirs that we haven't fathomed yet. I think you're right, agreed Anthony. There's one thing I'd like you to tell me, he continued. What's that? Why did you seem so surprised when I mentioned the name of Jimmy McGrath to you yesterday at Pont Street? Had you heard it before? I had, Sherlock Holmes. George, my cousin George Lomax, you know, came to see me the other day and suggested a lot of frightfully silly things. His idea was that I should come down here and make myself agreeable to this man, McGrath, and Delilah the memoirs out of us somehow. He didn't put it like that, of course. He talked a lot of nonsense about English gentlewomen and things like that, but this real meaning was never obscure for a moment. It was just the sort of rotten thing poor old George would think of. And then I wanted to know too much, and he tried to put me off with lies that wouldn't have deceived a child or two. By the way, the term Delilahing refers to the Bible story of Samson and Delilah, where Delilah was supposed to try to gain the trust of Samson, and then it was like this whole thing of his hair had magical powers or something like that. It's weird to recount it, but yeah, basically like seducing him to lower his guard so that she can put him at a disadvantage. Long story short, too late. Well, his plan seems to have succeeded anyhow, observed Anthony. Here I am, the James McGrath he had in mind, and here you are being agreeable to me. But alas, poor old George, no memoirs. Now I've got a question for you. When I said I hadn't written those letters, you said you knew I hadn't. You couldn't know any such thing. Oh, yes, I could, said Anthony, smiling. I've got a good working knowledge of psychology. You mean your belief in the sterling worth of my moral character was such that— But Anthony was shaking his head vigorously. Not at all. I don't know anything about your moral character. You might have a lover, and you might write to him, but he'd never lie down to be blackmailed. The Virginia Revell of those letters was scared stiff. You'd have fought. I wonder who the real Virginia Revell is. Where she is, I mean. It makes me feel as though I had a double somewhere. Anthony lit a cigarette. You know that one of the letters was written from Chimneys? He asked at last. What? Virginia was clearly startled. When was it written? It wasn't dated, but it's odd, isn't it? It's perfectly certain no other Virginia Revell has ever stayed at Chimneys. Bundle or Lord Caterham would have said something about the coincidence of the name if she had. Yes, it's rather queer. Do you know, Mrs. Revell, I'm beginning to disbelieve profoundly in this other Virginia Revell. She's very elusive, agreed Virginia. Extraordinarily elusive. I'm beginning to think that the person who wrote those letters deliberately used your name. But why? Cried Virginia. Why should they do such a thing? That's just the question. There's the devil of a lot to find out about anything. Who do you really think killed Michael? Asked Virginia suddenly. The comrades of the Red Hand? I suppose they might have done so, said Anthony in a dissatisfied voice. Pointless killing would be rather characteristic of them. Let's get to work, said Virginia. I see Lord Caterham and Bundle strolling together. The first thing to do is to find out definitely whether the dead man is Michael or not. Anthony paddled to shore, and a few moments later they had joined Lord Caterham and his daughter. Lunch is late, said his lordship in a depressing voice. Battle has insulted the cook, I expect. This is a friend of mine, Bundle, said Virginia. Be nice to him. Bundle looked earnestly at Anthony for some minutes, and then addressed a remark to Virginia as though he had not been there. Where did you pick up these nice-looking men, Virginia? How do you do it? She asked enviously. You can have him, said Virginia generously. I want Lord Caterham. She smiled upon the flattered peer, slipped her hand through his arm, and they moved off together. Do you talk? Said Bundle. Or are you just strong and silent? Talk, said Anthony. I babble, I murmur, I burble, like the running brook, you know. Sometimes I even ask questions. As, for instance? Who occupies the second room on the left from the end? He pointed to it as he spoke. What an extraordinary question, said Bundle. You intrigue me greatly. Let me see. Yes, that's Mademoiselle Brune's room, the French governess. She endeavors to keep my young sisters in order, Dulcie and Daisy, like the song, you know. I dare say they'd have called the next one Dorothy May, but Mother got tired of having nothing but girls and died. Thought someone else could take on the job of providing an heir. Mademoiselle Brune, said Anthony thoughtfully. How long has she been with you? 2 months. She came to us when we were in Scotland. Ah, said Anthony, I smell a rat. I wish I could smell some lunch, said Bundle. Do I ask the Scotland Yard man to have lunch with us, Mr. Cade? You're a man of the world, and you know about the etiquette of such things. We've never had a murder in a house before. Exciting, isn't it? I'm sorry your character was so completely cleared this morning. I've always wanted to meet a murderer and see for myself if they're as genial and charming as the Sunday papers always say they are. God, what's that? That seemed to be a taxi approaching the house. Its 2 occupants were a tall man with a bald head and a black beard, and a smaller and younger man with a black mustache. Anthony recognized the former and guessed that it was he, rather than the vehicle which contained him, that had wrung the exclamation of astonishment from his companion's lips. Unless I much mistake, he remarked, that is my old friend Baron Lollipop. Baron what? I call him Lollipop for convenience. The pronouncing of his own name tends to harden the arteries. He nearly wrecked the telephone this morning, remarked Bundle. So, that's the Baron, is it? I foresee he'll be turning on to me this afternoon. I've had Isaac Stein all morning. Let George do his own dirty work, say I, and to hell with politics. Excuse me leaving you, Mr. Cade, but I must stand by poor old father. Oh, hello, Marcel. I hope you're having a good day. Thank you so much for the follow. We're about halfway through the Secret of Chimneys. I do have, let me put up Maestro really quick as we're chatting a little bit. Here are the links to my socials where I let people know when I'm streaming, and on the Discord we strongly encourage pictures of pets. And then all of my story times I put up on YouTube, and they're all in playlist form, so you don't have to worry about seeking out the next one in the series. So I can chat a little bit more. End of the chapter is in a little ways. But feel free to stay stuff and chat, and I will reply when we have a little bit of a break between chapters. All right. And this, by the way, is Maestro. When I have him up, it means that I'm chatting like between chapters, or, at the beginning or the end. And that's for convenience for people who are watching on the VODs or on the YouTube. All right. So we are continuing. Let me find out where I was. Bundle retreated rapidly to the house. Anthony stood looking after her for a minute or two and thoughtfully lighted a cigarette. As he did so, his ear was caught by a stealthy sound quite near him. He was standing by the boathouse, and the sound seemed to come from just around the corner. The mental picture conveyed to him was that of a man vainly trying to stifle a sudden sneeze. Now I very much wonder who's behind the boathouse, said Anthony to himself. We'd better see, I think. Suiting the action to the word, he threw away the match he had just blown out and ran lightly and noiselessly round the corner of the boathouse. He came upon a man who had evidently been kneeling on the ground and was just struggling to rise to his feet. He was tall, wore a light-colored overcoat and glasses, and for the rest had a short, pointed black beard and slightly foppish manner. He was between 30 and 40 years of age, and altogether of a most respectable appearance. "What are you doing here?" asked Anthony. He was pretty certain that the man was not one of Lord Caterham's guests. "I beg your pardon," said the stranger, with a marked foreign accent that was meant to be an engaging, and what was meant to be an engaging smile. "Oh, thank you so much for the follow, Alexa. Welcome. I'll really quickly put up the links to the socials and the YouTube. The socials, Twitter and Discord, I let people know an hour before I stream when I'm going to be streaming. And then I put up all of my story times on YouTube, and they're all in playlist form, so you don't have to worry about finding the next one in the series. I will chat a little bit at the end of the chapter. Feel free to say stuff in chat, and I will get caught up at the end of the chapter. "What are you doing here?" asked Anthony. He was pretty certain that the man was not one of Lord Caterham's guests. "I beg your pardon," said the stranger with a marked foreign accent that was meant, and what was meant to be an engaging smile. "It is that I wish to return to the Jolly Cricketers, and I have lost my way. Would monsieur be so good as to direct me?" "Certainly," said Anthony, "but you don't go there by water, you know." "Eh?" said the stranger, with the air of one at a loss. "I said," repeated Anthony with a meaning glance at the boathouse, "that you won't get there by water. There is a right-of-way across the park, some distance away, but all this is the private part. You're trespassing." "I am so sorry," said the stranger. "I lost my direction entirely. I thought I would come up here and inquire." Anthony refrained from pointing out that kneeling behind a boathouse was a somewhat peculiar manner of prosecuting inquiries. He took the stranger kindly by the arm. "You go this way," he said. "Right round the lake and straight on. You can't miss the path. When you get on it, turn to the left, and it will lead you to the village. You are staying at the Cricketers, I suppose?" "Aye, monsieur. Since this morning. Many thanks for your kindness in directing me." "Don't mention it," said Anthony. "I hope you haven't caught cold." "Eh?" said the stranger. "From kneeling on the damp ground, I mean," explained Anthony. "I fancied I heard you sneezed." "I may have sneezed," admitted the other. "Quite so," said Anthony. "But you shouldn't suppress a sneeze, you know. One of the most eminent doctors said so only the other day. It's frightfully dangerous. I don't remember exactly what it does to you, whether it's an inhibition or whether it hardens your arteries, but you must never do it. Good morning." "Good morning, and thank you, monsieur, for setting me on the right road." Sorry, I'll reply at the break. "Second suspicious stranger from Village Inn," murmured Anthony to himself as he watched the others retreating for him. "And one that I can't place either. Appearance that of a French commercial traveler. I don't quite see him as a comrade of the Red Hand. Does he represent yet a third party in the harassed state of Czechoslovakia? The French governess has the second window from the end. Mysterious Frenchman is found slinking round the grounds, listening to conversation that are not meant for his ears. I'll bet my hat there's something in it." Musing thus, Anthony retraced his steps to the house. On the terrace he encountered Lord Caterham looking suitably depressed, and two new arrivals. He brightened a little at the sight of Anthony. "Ah, there you are," he remarked. "Let me introduce you to Baron and Captain Andrassy, Mr. Anthony Cade." The Baron stared at Anthony with growing suspicion. "Mr. Cade," he said stiffly, "I think not." "A word alone with you, Baron," said Anthony. "I can explain everything." The Baron bowed, and the two men walked down the terrace together. "Baron," said Anthony, "I must throw myself upon your mercy. I have so far strained the honor of an English gentleman as to travel to this country under an assumed name. I represented myself to you as Mr. James McGrath, but you must see for yourself that the deception involved was infinitesimal. You are doubtless acquainted with the works of Shakespeare, and his remarks about the unimportance of the nomenclature of roses. This case is the same. The man you wanted to see was the man in possession of the memoirs. I was that man. As you know only too well, I am no longer in possession of them. A neat trick, Baron, a very neat trick. Who thought of it, you or your principal?" "His Highness' own idea it was, and for anyone but him to carry it out he would not permit." He did it jolly well, said Anthony with approval. I never took him for anything but an Englishman. The education of an English gentleman did the prince receive, explained the Baron. The custom for the Slovakia it is. No professional could have pinched those papers better, said Anthony. May I ask, without indiscretion, what has become of them? Between gentlemen, began the Baron. You are too kind, Baron, murmured Anthony. I've never been called a gentleman so often as I have in the last 48 hours. I too say this. I believe them to be burnt. You believe but you don't know, eh? Is that it? His Highness is in his own keeping retained them. His purpose, it was to read them and then by the fire destroy them. I see, said Anthony. All the same, they are not the kind of light literature you'd skim through in half an hour. Among the effects of my martyred master, they have not discovered them. It is clear, therefore, that burnt they are. Said Anthony. I wonder. He was silent for a moment or two, and then went on. I have asked you these questions, Baron, because, as you may have heard, I myself have been implicated in the crime. I must clear myself absolutely, so that no suspicion attaches to me. Undoubtedly, said the Baron. Your honor demands it. Exactly, said Anthony. You put these things so well, I haven't got the knack for it. To continue, I can only clear myself by discovering the real murderer, and to do that I must have all the facts. This question of the memoirs is very important. It seems to me possible that to gain possession of them might be the motive of the crime. Tell me, Baron, is that a very far-fetched idea? The Baron hesitated for a moment or two. You yourself the memoirs have read? He asked cautiously at length. I think I am answered, said Anthony, smiling. Now, Baron, there's just one more thing. I should like to give you fair warning that it is still my intention to deliver that manuscript to the publishers on Wednesday next, the 13th of October. The Baron stared at him. But you have no longer got it? On Wednesday next, I said. Today is Friday. That gives me 5 days to get hold of it again. But if it is burnt? I don't think it is burnt. I have good reasons for not believing so. As he spoke, they turned the corner of the terrace. A massive figure was advancing towards them. Anthony, who had not yet seen the great Hermann Isaacstein, looked at him with considerable interest. Ah, Baron, said Isaacstein, waving a big black cigar he was smoking. This is a bad business, a very bad business. My good friend, Mr. Isaacstein, it is indeed, cried the Baron. All our noble edifice in ruins is. Anthony tactfully left the two gentlemen to their lamentations, and traced his steps along the terrace. Suddenly he came to a halt. A thin spiral of smoke was rising into the air, apparently from the very center of the yew hedge. It must be hollow in the middle, reflected Anthony. I've heard of such things before. He looked swiftly to right and left of him. Lord Caterham was at the farthest end of the terrace with Anthony and Drassy. Their backs were towards him. Anthony bent down and wriggled his way through the massive yew. He had been quite right in his supposition. The yew hedge was really not one, but two. A narrow passage divided them. The entrance to this was about halfway up on the side of the house. There was no mystery about it, but no one seeing the yew hedge from the front would have guessed at the probability. Anthony looked down the narrow vista. About halfway down, a man was reclining in a basket chair, a half-smoked cigar resting on the arm of the chair, and the gentleman himself appeared to be asleep. Said Anthony to himself. Evidently Mr. Hiram Fish prefers sitting in the shade. All right. So we are between chapters. I can chat a little bit. I'm doing all right. Thank you. And how are you doing, Marcel? Or Glitch. I like that name. Oh, and thank you so much for joining the Discord. We are We strongly encourage pet pictures on the Discord as well, which you can see quite a few of my two cats, Maestro and Snockings. Oh, hang on. There we go. There's a little introduction to them. Most of the artwork that I do, or cat artwork that I do, is of Maestro, because it's a lot easier to draw a tuxedo than it is to draw a tabby, though I do have some. I actually did a pretty good job on the tabby on my webcam frame. And yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself. Do you stream as well? And what kind of books do you like to read or listen to? All right, so I'm going to hide Maestro. We will continue, and it looks like we're about halfway through our story time today. So this might be a 5-part story time when all's said and done. Chapter 16, Tea in the Schoolroom. Anthony regained the terrace with a feeling uppermost in his mind that the only safe place for private conversations was the middle of the lake. The resonant boom of a gong sounded from the house, and Treadwell appeared in a stately fashion from a side door. "Luncheon is served, my lord." "Ah," said Lord Caterham, brisking up a little. "Lunch!" At that moment 2 children burst out of the house. They were high-spirited young women of 12 and 10, and though their names might be Dulcie and Daisy, as Bundle had affirmed, they appeared to be more generally known as Guggle and Winkle. They executed a kind of war dance, interspersed with shrill whoops, till Bundle emerged and quelled them. "Where's Mademoiselle?" she demanded. "She's got the migraine, the migraine, the migraine," chanted Winkle. "Hurrah!" said Guggle, joining in. Lord Caterham had succeeded in shepherding most of his guests into the house. Now he laid a restraining hand on Anthony's arm. "Come to my study," he breathed. "I've got something rather special there." Slinking down the hall, far more like a thief than like the master of the house, Lord Caterham gained the shelter of his sanctum. Here he unlocked a cupboard and produced various bottles. "Talking to foreigners really makes me so thirsty," he exclaimed apologetically. "I don't know why it is." There was a knock on the door, and Virginia popped her head round the corner of it. "Got a special cocktail for me?" she demanded. "Of course," said Lord Caterham hospitably. "Come in." The next few minutes were taken up with serious rites. "I needed that," said Lord Caterham with a sigh, as he replaced his glass on the table. "As I said just now, I find talking to foreigners particularly fatiguing. I think it's because they're so polite. Come along, let's have some lunch." He led the way to the dining room. Virginia put her hand on Anthony's arm and drew him back a little. "I've done my good deed for the day," she whispered. "I've got Lord Caterham to take me to see the body." "Well?" said Anthony eagerly. One theory of his was to be proved or disproved. Virginia was shaking her head. "You were wrong," she whispered. "It's Prince Michael, right?" "Oh," Anthony said, deeply chagrined. "And Mademoiselle had the migraine," she added, aloud, in a dissatisfied tone. "What has that got to do with it?" "Probably nothing, but I wanted to see her. You see, I've found out that Mademoiselle was the second room from the end, the one where I saw the light go. Oh, sorry. Ah, okay, sorry. They did this weird thing where they had dialogue by Anthony, and the next paragraph was also dialogue by Anthony, so it mixed me up. "And Mademoiselle had the migraine," he added aloud in a dissatisfied tone. "What has that got to do with it?" "Probably nothing, but I wanted to see her. You see, I've found out that Mademoiselle has the second room from the end, the one where I saw the light go up last night." "That's interesting." "Probably there's nothing in it." All the same, I mean to see mademoiselle before the day is out." Lunch was somewhat of an ordeal. Even the cheerful impartialities of Bundle failed to reconcile the heterogeneous assembly. The Baron and Andrassy were correct, formal, full of etiquette, and had the air of attending a meal in a mausoleum. Lord Caterham was lethargic and depressed. Bill Eversley stared longingly at Virginia. George, very mindful of the trying position in which he found himself, conversed weightily with the Baron and Mr. Isaacstein. Goggle and Winkle, completely beside themselves with joy at having a murder in the house, had to be continually checked and kept under, whilst Mr. Hiram Fish slowly masticated his food and drawled out dry remarks in his own peculiar idiom. Superintendent Battle had considerately vanished, and nobody knew what had become of him. "Oh, thank God, that's over," murmured Bundle to Anthony as they left the table. "George is taking the foreign contingent over to the Abbey this afternoon to discuss state affairs." "That will possibly relieve the atmosphere," agreed Anthony. "I don't mind the Americans so much," continued Bundle. "He and Father can talk first editions together quite happy in some secluded spot. Mr. Fish," as the object of their conversation drew near, "I am planning a peaceful afternoon for you." The American bowed. "That's too kind of you, Lady Eileen." "Mr. Fish," said Anthony, "had quite a peaceful morning." Mr. Fish shot a quick glance at him. "Ah, you observed me, then, in my secluded retreat? There are moments, sir, when far from the maddening crowd is the only motto for a man of quiet tastes." Bundle had drifted on, and the American and Anthony were left together. The former dropped his voice a little. "I opine," he said, "that there is considerable mystery about this little dust-up." "Any amount of it?" said Anthony. "That guy with the bald head was perhaps a family connection?" "Something of the kind." "These Central European nations beat the band," declared Mr. Fish. "It's kind of being rumored around that the deceased gentleman was a royal highness. Is that so, do you know?" "He was staying here as Count Stanislaus," replied Anthony evasively. To this Mr. Fish offered no further rejoinder than the somewhat cryptic, "Oh, boy," after which he relapsed into silence for some moments. "This police captain of yours," he observed at last, "Battle, or whatever his name is he the goods all right?" "Scotland Yard thinks so," replied Anthony dryly. "He seemed kind of hidebound to me," remarked Mr. Fish. "No hustle to him. This big idea of his, letting no one leave the house, what is there to it?" He darted a very sharp look at Anthony as he spoke. "Everyone's got to attend the inquest tomorrow morning, you see." "That's the idea, is it? No more to it than that? No question of Lord Caterham's guests being suspected?" "My dear Mr. Fish!" "I was getting mite uneasy, being a stranger in this country, but of course it was an outside job, I remember now. Window found unfastened, wasn't it?" "It was," said Anthony, looking straight in front of him. Mr. Fish sighed. After a minute or two, he said in a plaintive tone, "Young man, do you know how they get the water out of a mine?" "How?" "By pumping. But it's almighty hard work. I observe the figure of my genial host detaching itself from the group over yonder. I must join him." Mr. Fish walked gently away, and Bundle drifted back again. "Funny fish, isn't he?" she remarked. "He is." "It's no good looking for Virginia," said Bundle sharply. "It wasn't?" "You were. I don't know how she does it. It isn't that what she says. I don't even believe it's what she looks. But, oh boy, she gets there every time. Anyway, she's on duty elsewhere for the time. She told me to be nice to you, and I'm going to be nice to you, by force if necessary." "No force required," Anthony assured her. "But if it's all the same to you, I'd rather you were nice to me on the water in a boat." "It's not a bad idea," said Bundle meditatively. They strolled down to the lake together. "There's just one question I'd like to ask you," said Anthony as he paddled gently out from the shore, "before we turn to really interesting topics. Business before pleasure." "Whose bedroom do you want to know about now?" asked Bundle with weary patience. "Nobody's bedroom for the moment, but I would like to know where you got your French governess from." "The man's bewitched," said Bundle. "I got her from an agency, and I pay her £100 a year, and her Christian name is Genevieve. Anything more you want to know?" We'll assume the agency, said Anthony. "What about her references?" "Oh, glowing. She lived for 10 years with the Countess of Whatnot." Whatnot being Comtesse de Breteuil, Chateau de Breteuil Dinard. "You didn't actually see the Comtesse yourself. It was all done by letter?" "Exactly." Said Anthony. "You intrigue me," said Bundle. "You intrigue me enormously. Is it love or crime?" "Probably sheer idiocy on my part. Let's forget it." "Let's forget it," he says negligently, having extracted all the information he wants. "Mr. Cade, who do you suspect?" "I rather suspect Virginia as being the most unlikely person, or possibly Bill." "What about you?" "A member of the aristocracy joins in secret the Comrades of the Red Hand. It would create a sensation, all right." Anthony laughed. He liked Bundle, though he was a little afraid of the shrewd penetration of her sharp gray eyes. "You must be proud of all this," he said suddenly, waving his hand towards the great house in the distance. Bundle screwed up her eyes and tilted her head on to one side. "Yes, it means something, I suppose, but one's too used to it. Anyway, we're not here very much. Too deadly dull. We've been to Cowes and Deauville, all the summer after town, and then up to Scotland. Chimneys has been swathed in dust sheets for about 5 months. Once a week they take the dust sheets off, and coaches full of tourists come and gape and listen to Treadwell. On your right is the portrait of the 4th Marchioness of Caterham, painted by Sir Joshua Reynolds, etc., and Burt, the humorist of the party, nudges his girl and says, 'Hey, Gladys, we've got 2 pennyworth of pictures here, right enough,' and then they go and look at more pictures and yawn and shuffle their feet and wish it was time to go home. Yet history has been made here once or twice, by all accounts." "You've been listening to George," said Bundle sharply. "That's the kind of thing he always says." But Anthony had raised himself on his elbows and was staring at the shore. "Is that a third suspicious stranger I see standing disconsolately by the boathouse? Or is it one of the house party?" Bundle lifted her head from the scarlet cushion. "It's Bill," she said. "He seems to be looking for something." "He's probably looking for me," said Bundle without enthusiasm. "Shall we row quickly in the opposite direction?" "It's quite the right answer, but it should be delivered with more enthusiasm." "I shall row with double vigor after the rebuke." "Not at all," said Bundle. "I have my pride. Row me to where that young ass is waiting. Somebody's got to look after him, I suppose. Virginia must have given him the slip. One of these days, inconceivable as it seems, I might want to marry George, so I might as well practice being one of our well-known political hostesses." Anthony pulled obediently towards the shore. "And what's to become of me, I should like to know," he complained. "I refuse to be unwanted third. Is that the children I see in the distance?" "Yes, be careful or they'll rope you in." "I'm rather fond of children," said Anthony. "I might teach them some nice, quiet, intellectual game." "Well, don't say I didn't warn you." Having relinquished Bundle to the care of the disconsolate Bill, Anthony strolled off to where various shrill cries disturbed the peace of the afternoon. He was received with acclamation. "Are you any good at playing Red Indians?" asked Guggles sternly. "Ooh, okay. We're going to be making some adjustments there." "Rather," said Anthony. "You should hear the noise made when I'm being scalped like this," he illustrated. "Not so bad," said Winkle grudgingly. Now do the... Okay, maybe we'll skip over this part. Do. Sorry. Okay, we'll have to go and get washed up, I suppose, said Guggle gloomily. You will come to tea, won't you? You won't forget? Anthony swore solemnly that nothing should prevent him keeping the engagement. Satisfied, the youthful pair beat a retreat towards the house. Anthony stood for a minute looking after them, and, as he did so, he became aware of a man leaving the other side of the little copse of trees and hurrying away across the park. He felt almost sure that it was the same black-bearded stranger he had encountered that morning. Whilst he was hesitating whether to go after him or not, the trees just ahead of him were parted, and Mr. Hiram Fish stepped out into the open. He started slightly when he saw Anthony. "Peaceful afternoon, Mr. Fish?" inquired the latter. "I thank you, yes." Mr. Fish did not look as peaceful as usual, however. His face was flushed, and he was breathing hard as though he had been running. He drew out his watch and consulted it. "I guess," he said softly, "it's just about time for your British institution of afternoon tea." Closing his watch with a snap, Mr. Fish ambled gently away in the direction of the house. Anthony stood in a brown study and awoke with a start to the fact that Superintendent Battle was standing beside him. Not the faintest sound had heralded his approach, and he seemed literally to have materialized from space. "Where did you spring from?" said Anthony irritably. With a slight jerk of his head, Battle indicated the little copse of trees behind him. "It seems a popular spot this afternoon," remarked Anthony. "You were very lost in thought, Mr. Cade." "I was indeed. Do you know what I was doing, Battle? I was trying to put 2 and 1 and 5 and 3 together so as to make 4, and it can't be done. Battle, it simply can't be done." "There's difficulties that way," agreed the detective. "But you're just the man I wanted to see. Battle, I want to go away. Can it be done?" True to his creed, Superintendent Battle showed neither emotion nor surprise. His reply was easy and matter-of-fact. "That depends, sir, as to where you want to go." "I'll tell you exactly, Battle. I'll lay my cards upon the table. I want to get to Dinard, to the chateau of Madame la Comtesse de Breteuil. Can it be done?" "When do you want to go, Mr. Cade?" "Say tomorrow after the inquest. I could be back here by Sunday evening." "I see," said the superintendent with peculiar solidity. "Well, what about it?" "I've no objections, providing you go where you say you're going and come straight back here." "You're a man in 1,000, Battle. Either you have taken an extraordinary fancy to me, or else you're extraordinarily deep. Which is it?" Superintendent Battle smiled a little, but did not answer. Well, said Anthony, "I expect you'll take your precautions. Discreet minions of the law will follow my suspicious footsteps, so be it. But I do wish I knew what it was all about." "I don't get you, Mr. Cade." "The memoirs, what all the fuss is about. Were they only memoirs, or have you got something up your sleeve?" Battle smiled again. "Take it like this. I'm doing you a favor because you've made a favorable impression on me, Mr. Cade. I'd like you to work in with me over this case. The amateur and the professional, they go well together. The one has the intimacy, so to speak, and the other has experience." "Well," said Anthony slowly, "I don't mind admitting that I've always wanted to try my hand at unraveling a murder mystery." "Any ideas about the case at all, Mr. Cade?" "Plenty of them," said Anthony. "But they're mostly questions. As for instance, who steps into the murdered Michael's shoes? It seems to me that that is important." A rather wry smile came over Superintendent Battle's face. "I wonder if you'd think of that, sir? Prince Nicholas Obolovich is the next heir, first cousin of this gentleman. "And where is he at the present moment?" asked Anthony, turning away to light a cigarette. "Don't tell me you don't know, Battle, because I shan't believe you." We've reason to believe that he's in the United States. He was until quite lately, at all events, raising money on his expectations. Anthony gave vent to a surprised whistle. I get you, said Anthony. Michael was backed by England, Nicholas by America. In both countries, a group of financiers are anxious to obtain the oil concessions. The Loyalist Party adopted Michael as their candidate. Now they'll have to look elsewhere, gnashing their teeth on the part of Isaacstein and Company and Mr. George Lomax. Rejoicings in Wall Street, am I right? You're not far off, said Superintendent Battle. Said Anthony. I almost dare swear that I know what you are doing in that copse. The detective smiled, but made no reply. International politics are very fascinating, said Anthony. But I fear I must leave you. I have an appointment in the schoolroom. He strode briskly away towards the house. Inquiries of the dignified Treadwell showed him the way to the schoolroom. He tapped on the door and entered, to be greeted by squeals of joy. Goggle and Winkle immediately rushed to him and bore him in triumph to be introduced to Mademoiselle. For the first time, Anthony felt a qualm. Mademoiselle Brune was a small, middle-aged woman with a sallow face, pepper and salt hair, and a budding moustache. As the notorious foreign adventuress, she did not fit into picture at all. I believe, said Anthony to himself, I am making the most utter fool of myself. Never mind. I must go through with it now. He was extremely pleasant to Mademoiselle, and she, on her part, was evidently delighted to have a good-looking young man invade her schoolroom. The meal was a great success. But that evening, alone in the charming bedchamber that had been allotted to him, Anthony shook his head several times. I'm wrong, he said to himself. For the second time I'm wrong. Somehow or other I can't get the hang of this thing. He stopped in his pacing of the floor. What the devil? Oh, hey, Kickin. Good to see you. It's going all right. And how's it going with you? Did you have a good weekend? I'll put up my Maestro really quick while we chat. By the way, I've decided on my schedule for April. I haven't posted it up in Twitter or the Discord, but it's going to be Fridays and Sundays, 2 to 4. So that's, goodness, is that midnight to 2 in the morning for you? Is it plus 8 or is it plus 10 hours? I don't remember. Maybe it's 11 to 1? I don't know, sometime at night. Oh, I bet. And it is pretty late for you, too. I've never played GTA, but I enjoy watching them play it on Rooster Teeth. Their little challenges that they do, they're a lot of fun. Like, they've done the races and, I don't know, just a lot of fun, ridiculous stuff. I'm actually almost to the end of a chapter, so I'll go back to chatting with you in a moment. Be right back. Well, I'll be right back, yeah. What the devil? Began Anthony. The door was being softly opened. In another minute, a man had slipped into the room and stood deferentially by the door. He was a big, fair man, squarely built, with high Slavonic cheekbones and dreamy, fanatic eyes. Who the devil are you? Asked Anthony, staring at him. The man replied in perfect English. I am Boris Anchukov. Prince Michael's servant, eh? That is so. I served my master. He is dead. Now I serve you. Well, that's very kind of you, said Anthony, but I don't happen to want a valet. You are my master now. I will serve you faithfully. Yes, but Look here. I don't need a valet. I can afford one. Borisanchukov looked at him with a touch of scorn. I do not ask for money. I served my master. So will I serve you to the death. Stepping quickly forward, he dropped on one knee, caught Anthony's hand, and placed it on his forehead. Then he rose swiftly and left the room as suddenly as he had come. Anthony stared after him, his face a picture of astonishment. That damned odd, he said to himself. Faithful sort of dog, curious the instincts of fellows here. Curious the instincts these fellows have. He rose and paced up and down. All the same, he muttered, it's awkward, damned awkward just at present. Okay, I'm between chapters. I can chat. Hey, Corel. Glad to see you. How are you doing today? Hope you are more rested. I love this tea. It's so lovely and gentle. It's the Lady Grey tea. Yeah, I get it. It's weird where it's like, you get too little sleep or you get too much sleep and it makes you exhausted. And it's really interesting that too much sleep can make you tired. But, yeah, it happens. I get it. Yeah. It's one of my favorite tiaras. It's my torrential downpour tiara. You can kind of see the little shade, or the little colored bits right there. Sorry, that was too loud. Little colored bits. There are leaves that are being blown in the wind. And this is there, yeah. Oh no. I would give you the one I have in my fridge, but I mean, you can't really post a Coca-Cola in chat, so sorry about that. Looks like we have 1 or 2 more chapters we can do for this story time. Yeah, something like that. Oh, and I suppose I should ask you guys right now. Ooh, okay, I will do that. She's actually right here. Hey, Snockings. I see you. You're awake. Since we're at a little bit of a break. Moving things so that I can do this. And let's see. Hey, Snockings. Ralph's giving you a treat. Come here. Ugh. Hi. Okay. Hey, Snoggings, say hi to them. Corral's giving you a treat, so here we go. I'm a little groggy. Snoggings. There's more in there. There's 3 more. Come on. One more. It's right there. Snockings, come on. Snockings. Hey, hey. There we go. That was from Corel. Yeah. She's not used to being hand-fed treats. Alright, let's get everything set back up. Alright, hello, tail. That was it. little bit of kitty ASMR. Are you gonna sit in my lap while we continue Storytime Stockings? Thank you for the view. It's lovely. Right. Let us continue. Alright. So we're going to hide Maestro and we will continue. Chapter 17. A Midnight Adventure. Oh, thank you for the hydrate reminder. Lovely. The inquest took place on the following morning. It was extraordinarily unlike the inquests as pictured in sensational fiction. It satisfied even George Lomax in its rigid suppression of all interesting details. Superintendent Battle and the coroner, working together with the support of the chief constable, had reduced the proceedings to the lowest level of boredom. Immediately after the inquest, Anthony took an unostentatious departure. His departure was the one bright spot in the day for Bill Eversley. George Lomax, obsessed with fear that something damaging to his department might leak out, had been exceedingly trying. Miss Oscar and Bill had been in constant attendance. Everything useful and interesting had been done by Miss Oscar. Bill's part had been to run to and fro with countless messages, to decode telegrams, and to listen by the hour to George's repeating himself. It was a completely exhausted young man who retired to bed on Saturday night. He had had practically no chance to talk to Victoria all day, owing to George's exactions, and he felt injured and ill-used. Thank goodness that Colonel Fellow had taken himself off. He had monopolized far too much of Virginia's society anyway. Oh, Colonial Fellow. And of course, as George Lomax went on making an ass of himself like this, his mind seething with resentment, Bill fell asleep, and in dreams came consolation, for he dreamt of Virginia. It was a heroic dream, a dream of burning timbers in which he played the part of a gallant rescuer. He brought down Virginia from the topmost story in his arms. She was unconscious. He laid her on the grass. Then he went off to find a packet of sandwiches. It was most important that he should find that packet of sandwiches. George had it, but instead of giving it up to Bill, he began to dictate telegrams. They were now in the vestry of a church, and any minute Virginia might arrive to be married to him. Horror! He was wearing pajamas. He must get home at once and find his proper clothes. He rushed out to the car. The car would not start. No petrol in the tank. He was getting desperate. And then a big general bus drew up, and Virginia got out of it on the arm of the bald-headed Baron. She was deliciously cool and exquisitely dressed in gray. She came over to him and shook him by the shoulders playfully. "Bill," she said. "Oh, Bill." She shook him harder. "Bill," she said. "Wake up. Oh, do wake up." Very dazed, Bill woke up. He was in his bedroom at Chimneys. But part of the dream was still with him. Virginia was leaning over him and was repeating the same words with variations. "Wake up, Bill! Oh, do wake up! Bill!" "Hello," said Bill, sitting up in bed. "What's the matter?" Virginia gave a sigh of relief. "Oh, thank goodness. I thought you'd never wake up. I've been shaking you and shaking you. Are you properly awake now?" "I think so," said Bill doubtfully. "You great lump," said Virginia. "The trouble I've had. My arms are aching." "These insults are uncalled for," said Bill with dignity. "Let me say, Virginia, that I consider your conduct most unbecoming, not at all that of a pure young widow." "Don't be an idiot, Bill. Things are happening." "What kind of things?" "Queer things. In the council chamber I thought I heard a door bang somewhere, and I came down to see, and then I saw a light in the council chamber. I crept along the passage and peeped through the crack of the door. I couldn't see much, but what I could see was so extraordinary that I felt I must see more. And then all of a sudden I felt that I should like a nice, strong man with me. And you were the nicest and biggest and strongest man I could think of, so I came in and tried to wake you up quietly. But I've been ages doing it." "I see," said Bill. "And what do you want me to do now? Get up and tackle the burglars?" Virginia wrinkled her brows. "I'm not sure that they are burglars. Bill, it's very queer. But don't let's waste time talking. Get up." Bill slipped obediently out of bed. "Wait until I don a pair of boots, the big ones with nails in them. However big and strong I am, I'm not going to tackle hardened criminals with bare feet." "I like your pajamas, Bill," said Virginia dreamily. "Brightness without vulgarity." "While we're on the subject," remarked Bill, reaching for his second boot, "I like that thingamabob of yours. It's a pretty shade of green. What do you call it? It's not just an evening gown, is it?" "It's a negligee," said Virginia. "I'm glad you led such a pure life, Bill." "I haven't," said Bill indignantly. "You've just betrayed the fact. You're very nice, Bill, and I like you. I dare say that tomorrow morning, say about 10 o'clock, a good, safe hour of not unduly exciting the emotions, I might even kiss you." "I always think these things are best carried out in the spur of the moment," suggested Bill. "We've other fish to fry," said Virginia. "If you don't want to put on gas mask and a shirt of chain mail, shall we start?" "I'm ready," said Bill. He wriggled into a lurid silk dressing gown and picked up a poker. "The orthodox weapon," he observed. "Come on," said Virginia, "and don't make a noise." They crept out of the room and along the corridor, and then down the wide double staircase. Virginia frowned as they reached the bottom of it. "Those boots of yours aren't exactly domes of silence, are they, Bill?" "Nails will be nails," said Bill. "I'm doing my best." "You'll have to take them off," said Virginia firmly. Bill groaned. "You can carry them in your hand. I want to see if you can make out what's going on in the council chamber. Bill, it's awfully mysterious. Why should burglars take a man in armor to pieces?" "Well, I suppose they can't take him away whole very well. They disarticulate him and pack him neatly." Virginia shook her head, dissatisfied. "What should they want to steal a moldy old suit of armor for? Why, Chimneys is full of treasures that are much easier to take away." "Oh, it's that gem, I bet, that got stolen a couple years ago." Bill shook his head. "How many of them are there?" he asked, taking a firmer grip of his poker. "I couldn't see properly. You know what a keyhole is, and they only had a flashlight." "I expect they've gone by now," said Bill hopefully. He sat on the bottom stair and drew off his boots. Then, holding them in his hand, he crept along the passage that led to the council chamber, Virginia close beside him. They halted outside the massive oak door. All was silent within, but suddenly Virginia pressed his arm, and he nodded. A bright light had shone for a minute through the keyhole. Bill went down on his knees and applied his eye to the orifice. What he saw was confusing in the extreme. The scene of the drama was being enacted inside was evidently just to the left, out of his line of vision. A subdued chink every now and then seemed to point to the fact that the invaders were still dealing with the figure in armor. There were two of these, Bill remembered. They stood together by the wall just under the Holbein portrait. The light of the electric torch was evidently being directed upon the operations in progress. It left the rest of the room nearly in darkness. Once a figure flitted across Bill's line of vision, but there was not significant light to distinguish anything about it. It might have been that of a man or a woman. In a minute or two it flitted back again, and then the subdued chinking sounded again. Presently there came a new sound, a faint tap-tap as of knuckles on wood. Bill sat back on his heels suddenly. "What is it?" whispered Virginia. "Nothing. It's not going on like this. It's no good going on like this. We can't see anything, and we can't guess what they're up to. I must go in and tackle them." He drew on his boots and stood up. Now, Virginia, listen to me. We'll open the door as softly as possible. You know where the switch of the electric light is? Yes, just by the door. I don't think there are more than 2 of them. There may be only 1. I want to get well into the room. When I say go, I want you to switch on the lights. Do you understand? Perfectly. And don't scream or faint or anything. I won't let anything hurt you. My hero, murmured Virginia. Bill peered at her suspiciously through the darkness. He heard a faint sound which might have been either a sob or a laugh. Then he grasped his poker firmly and rose to his feet. He felt that he was fully alive to this situation. Very softly he turned the handle of the door. It yielded and swung gently inward. Bill felt Virginia close behind him. Together they moved noiselessly into the room. At the farther end of the room, the torch was lying upon a Holbein picture. "Oh, hello, Jerry. How are you doing?" Silhouetted against it was the figure of a man, standing on a chair and gently tapping on the paneling. His back, of course, was to them, and he merely loomed up as a monstrous shadow. What more they might have seen cannot be told, for at that moment Bill's nails squeaked upon the parquet floor. The man swung round, directing the powerful torch full upon them, and almost dazzling them with the sudden glare. Bill did not hesitate. "Go!" he roared to Virginia, and sprang for his man, as he obediently pressed down the switch of the electric light. The big chandelier should have been flooded with light, but instead all that happened was the click of the switch. The room remained in darkness. Virginia heard Bill curse freely. The next minute the air was filled with panting, scuffling sounds. The torch had fallen to the ground and extinguished itself in the fall. There was the sound of a desperate struggle going on in the darkness, but as to who was getting the better of it, and indeed as to who was taking part in it, Virginia had no idea. Had there been anyone else in the room besides the man who was tapping the paneling? There might have been. Their glimpse had been only a momentary one. Virginia felt paralyzed. She hardly knew what to do. She dared not try to join in the struggle. To do so might hamper and not aid Bill. Her one idea was to stay in the doorway so that anyone trying to escape should not leave the room that way. At the same time, she had disobeyed Bill's express instructions and screamed loudly and repeatedly for help. She heard doors opening upstairs and a sudden gleam of light from the hall and the big staircase. If only Bill could hold this man until help came. But at that minute there was a final terrific upheaval. They must have crashed into one of the figures in armor, for it fell to the ground with a deafening noise. Virginia saw dimly a figure springing for the window, and at the same time heard Bill cursing and disengaging himself from fragments of armor. For the first time she left her post and rushed wildly for the figure at the window, but the window was already unlatched. The intruder had no need to stop and fumble for it. He sprang out and raced away down the terrace and round the corner of the house. Virginia raced after him. She was young and athletic, and she turned the corner of the terrace not many seconds after her quarry. But there she ran headlong into the arms of a man who was emerging from a small side door. It was Mr. Hiram P. Fish. "Gee, it's a lady!" he exclaimed. "I beg your pardon, Mrs. Revell. I took you for one of those thugs fleeing from justice." He's just passed this way," cried Virginia breathlessly. "Can we find him?" But even as she spoke, she knew it was too late. The man must have gained the park by now, and it was a dark night with no moon. She retraced her steps to the council chamber, Mr. Fish by her side, discoursing in a soothing monotone upon the habits of burglars in general, of which he seemed to have a wide experience. Lord Caterham, Bundle, and various frightened servants were standing in the doorway of the council chamber. "What the devil's the matter?" asked Bundle. "Is it burglars? What are you, Mr. Fish, doing, Virginia, taking a midnight stroll?" Virginia explained the events of the evening. "How frightfully exciting," commented Bundle. "You don't usually get a murder and a burglary crowded into one weekend. What's the matter with the lights in here? They're all right everywhere else." That mystery was soon explained. The bulbs had been had simply been removed and laid in a row against the wall. Mounted on a pair of steps, the dignified Treadwell, dignified even in undress, restored illumination to the stricken apartment. "If I'm not mistaken," said Lord Caterham, in his sad voice, as he looked around him, "this room has recently been the centre of somewhat violent activity." There was some justice in the remark. Everything that could have been knocked over had been knocked over. The floor was littered with splintered chairs, broken china, and fragments of armor. "How many of them were there?" asked Bundle. "It seems to have been a desperate fight." "Only one, I think," said Virginia. But even as she spoke, she hesitated a little. Certainly only one person, a man, had passed out through the window. But as she had rushed after him, she had a vague impression of a rustle somewhere close at hand. If so, the second occupant of the room could have escaped through the door. Perhaps, though, the rustle had been an effect of her own imagination. Bill appeared suddenly at the window. He was out of breath and panting hard. "Oh, damn that fellow!" he exclaimed wrathfully. "He's escaped! I've been hunting all over the place. Not a sign of him." "Cheer up, Bill," said Virginia. "Better luck next time." "Well," said Lord Caterham, "what do you think we'd better do now? Go back to bed? I can't get hold of Badgeworthy at this time of night. Treadwell, you know the sort of thing that's necessary. Just see to it, will you?" "Very good, my lord." With a sigh of relief, Lord Caterham prepared to retreat. "That beggar Isaacstein sleeps soundly," he remarked with a touch of envy. "You'd have thought all this row would have brought him down." He looked across at Mr. Fish. "You've found time to dress, I see," he added. "I flung on a few articles of clothing, yes," admitted the American. "Very sensible of you," Lord Caterham said. "Damn chilly, these things. Pajamas." He yawned in a rather depressed mood. The house party retired to bed. Chapter 18. Second Midnight Adventure. Oh, thank you so much, Corel. Chapter 18. Second Midnight Adventure. The first person that Anthony saw as he alighted from his train on the following afternoon was Superintendent Battle. His face broke into a smile. "I've returned according to contract," he remarked. "Did you come down here to assure yourself of the fact?" Battle shook his head. "I wasn't worrying about that, Mr. Cade. I happen to be going to London, that's all." "You have such a trustful nature, Battle." "Do you think so, sir?" "No, I think you're deep, very deep. Still waters, you know, and all that sort of thing. So you're going to London?" "I am, Mr. Cade." "I wonder why." The detective did not reply. "You're so chatty," said Anthony. "That's what I like about you." A far-off twinkle showed in Battle's eyes. "What about your own little job, Mr. Cade?" he inquired. "How did that go off?" "I've drawn blank, Battle. For the second time I've been proved hopelessly wrong. Galling, isn't it?" "What was the idea, sir, if I may ask?" "I suspected the French governess, Battle. A, upon the grounds of her being the most unlikely person according to the canons of the best fiction. B, because there was a light in her room on the night of the tragedy." "That wasn't much to go upon." "You are quite right. It was not. But I discovered that she had only been here a short time, and I also found a suspicious Frenchman spying around the place. You know all about him, I suppose?" You mean the man who calls himself Monsieur Chalet? Staying at the Cricketer's, a traveller in silk?" "That's it, is it? What about him? What does Scotland Yard think?" "His actions have been suspicious," said Superintendent Battle expressionlessly. "Very suspicious, I should say. Well, I put two and two together. French governess in the house, French stranger outside. I decided that they were in league together, and I hurried off to interview the lady with whom Mademoiselle Brune had lived for the last 10 years. I was fully prepared to find that she had never heard of any such person as Mademoiselle Brune, but I was wrong, Battle. Mademoiselle is the genuine ticket." Battle nodded. I must admit, said Anthony, that as soon as I spoke to her, I had an uneasy conviction that I was barking up the wrong tree. She seemed so absolutely the governess. Again Battle nodded. All the same, Mr. Cade, you can't always go by that. Women especially can do a lot with makeup. I've seen quite a pretty girl with the color of her hair altered, sallow complexion stain, slightly reddened eyelids, and most efficacious of all, dowdy clothes, who would fail to be identified by 9 people out of 10 who had seen her in her former character, and haven't got quite the same pull. You can do something with the eyebrows, and of course different tastes of sets of false teeth alter the whole expression. But there are always the ears. There's an extraordinary lot of character in ears, Mr. Cade. Don't look so hard at mine, Battle, complained Anthony. You make me quite nervous. I'm not talking of false ears and grease paints, continued Superintendent. It's only for books. No, there are very few men who can escape identification and put it over on you. In fact, there's only one man I know who has positive genius for impersonation, King Victor. Ever heard of King Victor, Mr. Cade? There was something so sharp and sudden about the way the detective put the question that Anthony checked the words that were rising to his lips. King Victor, he said reflectively instead. Somehow I seem to have heard the name. One of the most celebrated jewel thieves in the world. Irish father, French mother, can speak 5 languages at least. He's been serving a sentence, but his time was up a few months ago. Oh, thank you so much for the cheer. How are you doing, Nin? Sorry, I'm still in the middle of the chapter, so I've got the chapter, whatever it's called. I hope you're enjoying the story. And if you wanted to get caught up on any of the story times, Corel, if you could put up the YouTube and also the socials. I put all of my story times up on YouTube so you can, get caught up. They're all in playlist form, so you don't have to. Thank you so much, Corel. So you don't have to worry about finding the next part in the Storytime series. Oh, and thank you again. Oh, okay. Glad to see you. How is everything down there, by the way? I'll put up Maestro. By the way, this right here, this little guy, is Maestro, and whenever you see him up in the picture, that means that I'm chatting between chapters or, just a little introduction. And he is my handsome, handsome boy. So I will, I'll continue, and feel free to continue writing in chat. I'll get caught up at the end of the chapter. He's been serving his sentence, but oh, hang on a second. I gotta have Meister disappear. There we go. Now we're back to story time. King Victor, he said reflectively instead. Somehow I seem to have heard the name. One of the most celebrated jewel thieves in the world, Irish father, French mother, can speak 5 languages at least. He's been serving a sentence, but his time was up a few months ago. Really? Where is he supposed to be now? Well, Mr. Cade, that's what we'd rather like to know. The plot thickens, said Anthony lightly. No chance of him turning up here, is there? But I suppose he wouldn't be interested in political memoirs, only in jewels. There's no saying, said Superintendent Battle. For all we know, he may be here already. Disguised as the second footman? Splendid. You'll recognize him by his ears and cover yourself with glory. Quite fond of your little joke, aren't you? Hey, Mikey. How are you doing? Good to see you. Quite fond of your little joke, aren't you, Mr. Cade? By the way, what do you think of that curious business at Staines? Staines? said Anthony. "What's been happening at Staines?" "It was in Saturday's paper. I thought you might have seen about it. Man found by the roadside shot. Foreigner. It was in the papers again today, of course." "I did say something about it," said Anthony carelessly. "Not suicide, I suppose?" "No, there was no weapon. As yet the man hasn't been identified." "You seem very interested," said Anthony, smiling. "No connection with Prince Michael's death, is there?" His hand was quite steady. So were his eyes. Was it his fancy that Superintendent Battle was looking at him with peculiar intentness? "Seems to be quite an epidemic of that sort of thing," said Battle. "But, well, I dare say there's nothing in it." He turned away, beckoning to a porter as the London train came shuddering in. Anthony drew a faint sigh of relief. He strolled across the park in an unusually thoughtful mood. He purposely chose to approach the house from the same direction as that from which he had come on the fateful Thursday night, and as he drew near to it, he looked up at the window, cudgelling his brain to make sure of the one where he had seen the light. Was he quite sure that it was the second from the end? And doing so, he made a discovery. There was an angle at the corner of the house in which was a window set further back. Standing on one spot, you counted this window as the first, and the first one built out over the second. Hang on a second. Standing in one spot, you counted this window as the first, and the first one built out over the council chamber as the second. But move a few yards to the right, and the part built out over the council chamber appeared to be the end of the house. The first window was invisible, and the two windows of the rooms over the council chamber would have appeared the first and second from the end. Where exactly had he been standing when he had seen the light flash up? Anthony found the question very hard to determine. A matter of a yard or so made all the difference. But one point was made abundantly clear. It was quite possible that he had been mistaken in describing the light as occurring in the second room from the end. It might equally have been the third. Now, who occupied the third room? Anthony was determined to find that out as soon as possible. Fortune favored him. In the hall, Treadwell had just set the massive silver urn in his place on the tea tray. Nobody else was there. "Hello, Treadwell," said Anthony. "I wanted to ask you something. Who has the third room for the end on the west side of the council chamber, I mean?" Treadwell reflected for a moment or two. "That would be the American gentleman's room, sir, Mr. Fish." "Oh, is it? Thank you." "Not at all, sir." "Oh, thank you so much for the host over. How are you doing? I'm glad to see you." We still have quite a bit left to read, about maybe 8 more pages. Good to hear. And I'll chat a bit after the chapter. That would be the American gentleman's room, sir, Mr. Fish. "Oh, is it? Thank you." "Not at all, sir." "Oh, thank you so much. And this is the perfect place to lurk as well." Treadwell prepared to depart, then paused. The desire to be the first to impart news makes even pontifical butlers human. "Perhaps you have heard, sir, of what occurred last night?" "Not a word," said Anthony. "What did occur last night?" "An attempted robbery, sir." "Not really? Was anything taken?" "No, sir. The thieves were dismantling the suits of armor in the council chamber when they were surprised and forced to flee. Unfortunately, they got clear away." "Well, that's very extraordinary," said Anthony. "The council chamber again. Did they break in in that way?" "It is supposed, sir, that they forced the window." Satisfied with the interest his information had aroused, Treadwell resumed his retreat, but brought up short with a dignified apology. "I beg your pardon, sir. I didn't hear you come in, and I didn't know you were standing just behind me." Mr. Isaacstein had been the victim of the impact waved his hand in a friendly fashion. "No harm done, my good fellow. I assure you no harm done." Treadwell retired, looking contemptuous, and Isaacstein came forward and dropped into an easy chair. "Hello, Cade, so you're back again. Been hearing all about our last night's little show?" "Yes," said Anthony. "Rather an exciting weekend, isn't it?" "I should imagine that last night was the work of local men," said Isaacstein. "It seems a clumsy amateurish affair." "Is there anyone about here who collects armor?" asked Anthony. "Seems a curious thing to select." "Very curious," agreed Isaacstein. He paused a minute and then said slowly, "The whole position here is very unfortunate." There was something almost menacing in his tone. "I don't quite understand," said Anthony. "Why are we all being kept here in this way? The inquest was over yesterday. Prince's body will be removed to London, where it has been given out that he died of heart failure, and still nobody is allowed to leave the house. Mr. Lomax knows no more than I do. He refers to me to Superintendent Battle." "Superintendent Battle has something up his sleeve," said Anthony thoughtfully, "and it seems the essence of his plan that nobody should leave." "But excuse me, Mr. Cade, you have been away." "With a string tied to my leg. I've no doubt that I was shadowed the whole time. I shouldn't have been given a chance of disposing of the revolver or anything of that kind." "Oh, the revolver," said Isaacstein thoughtfully. "That has not yet been found, I think?" "Not yet." "Possibly thrown into the lake in passing." "Very possibly." "Where is Superintendent Battle? I have not seen him this afternoon." "He's gone to London. I met him at the station." "Gone to London? Really? Did he say when he would be back?" "Early tomorrow." So I understand." Virginia came in with Lord Caterham and Mr. Fish. She smiled a welcome at Anthony. "So you're back, Mr. Cade. Have you heard all about our adventures last night?" "Why, truly, Mr. Cade," said Hiram Fish, "it was a night of strenuous excitement. Did you hear that I mistook Mrs. Revell for one of the thugs?" "And in the meantime," said Anthony, "the thug got clear away," said Mr. Fish mournfully. "Do pour out," said Lord Caterham to Virginia. "I don't know where Bundle is." Virginia officiated. Then she came and sat down near Anthony. "Come to the boathouse after tea," she said in a low voice. "Bill and I have got to tell you a lot." Then she joined lightly in the general conversation. The meeting at the boathouse was duly held. Virginia and Bill were bubbling over with their news. They agreed that a boat in the middle of the lake was the only safe place for confidential conversation. "Oh, thank you so much for the follow I have. Hope you're enjoying it. We still have, let's see, how many is that? 6 more pages left of story time. But don't worry, we have, I put all of my story times up on YouTube so you can get caught up and all of that. So, Corel, if you could put up the YouTube, that would be amazing. Thank you much. Okay, now I have to find... Oh, okay, I was down here. "Come to the boathouse after tea," she said in a low voice. "Bill and I have got a lot to tell you." Then she joined lightly in the general conversation. The meeting at the boathouse was duly held. Virginia and Bill were bubbling over with their news. They agreed that a boat in the middle of the lake was the only safe place for confidential conversation. Having paddled out a sufficient distance, the full story of last night's adventure was related to Anthony. Bill looked a little sulky. He wished Virginia would not insist on bringing this colonial fellow into it. "It's very odd," said Anthony when the story was finished. "What do you make of it?" he asked Virginia. "I think they were looking for something," she returned promptly. "The burglar idea is absurd. They thought the something, whatever it was, might be concealed in the suits of armor, that's clear enough. But why tap the paneling? It looks more as though they were looking for a secret staircase or something of the like." "There's a priest's hole at Chimney, I know," said Virginia. "And I believe there's a secret staircase as well. Lord Caterham would tell us all about it. What I want to know is, What can they have been looking for? It can't have been the memoirs, said Anthony. They're a great bulky packet. It must have been something small. George knows, I expect, said Virginia. I wonder whether I could get it out of him. All along I felt there was something behind all this. You say that there was only one man, pursued Anthony, but that there might possibly be another, as you thought you heard someone going towards the door as you sprang to the window? The sound was very slight, said Virginia. It might have been just my imagination. It's quite possible, but in case it wasn't your imagination, the second person must have been an inmate of the house. I wonder now. What are you wondering at? Asked Virginia. The thoroughness of Mr. Hiram Fish, who dresses himself completely when he hears screams from help downstairs. There's something in that, agreed Virginia. And then there's Isaacstein, who sleeps through it all. That's suspicious, too. Surely he couldn't. There's that fellow Boris, suggested Bill. He looks an unmitigated ruffian. Michael's servant, I mean. Chimneys is full of suspicious characters, said Virginia. I dare say the others are just as suspicious as us. I wish Superintendent Battle hadn't gone to London. I think it's rather stupid of him. By the way, Mr. Cade, I'd seen that peculiar-looking Frenchman about once or twice spying around the park. It's a mix-up, confessed Anthony. I've been away on a wild goose chase, made a thorough ass of myself. Look here, to me the whole question seems to revolve around this. I mean, did the men find what they were looking for last night? Supposing they didn't, said Virginia. I'm pretty sure they didn't, as a matter of fact. Just this, I believe they'll come again. They know, or they soon will know, that Battle's in London. They'll take the risk and come again tonight. Do you really think so? There's a chance. Now we three will form a little syndicate. Eversley and I will conceal ourselves with due precaution in the council chamber. What about me? Interrupted Virginia. Don't think you're going to leave me out of it. Listen to me, Virginia, said Bill. This is men's work. Don't be an idiot, Bill. I'm in on this. Don't you make any mistake about it. The syndicate will keep watch tonight. It was settled thus, and the details of the plan were laid. After the party had retired to bed, first one and then another of this syndicate crept down. They were all armed with powerful electrical torches, and in the pocket of Anthony's coat lay a revolver. Torches meaning flashlights. Anthony had said that he believed another attempt to resume this search would be made. Nevertheless, he did not expect that the attempt would be made from outside. He believed that Virginia had been correct in her guess that someone had passed her in the dark the night before, and as he stood in the shadow of an old oak dresser, it was towards the door and not the window that his eyes were directed. Virginia was crouching behind a figure in armor on the opposite wall, and Bill was by the window. The minutes passed at interminable length. 1 o'clock chimed, then the half-hour, then 2, then half-hour. Anthony felt stiff and cramped. He was coming slowly to the conclusion that he had been wrong. No attempt would be made tonight. And then he stiffened suddenly, all his senses on the alert. He had heard a footstep on the terrace outside. Silence again, and then a low scratching noise at the window. Suddenly it ceased, and the window swung open. A man stepped across the sill. There are some typos in here. A man stepped across the sill into the room. He stood quite still for a moment, peering round as though listening. After a minute or two, seemingly satisfied, he switched on a torch he carried and turned it rapidly round the room. Apparently he saw nothing unusual. The three watchers held their breath. He went over to the same bit of panelled wall he had been examining the night before. Then a terrible knowledge smote Bill. He was going to sneeze. The wild race through the dew-laden park the night before had given him a chill. All day he had sneezed intermittently. A sneeze was due now, and nothing on earth would stop it. He adopted all the remedies he could think of. He pressed his upper lip, swallowed hard, threw back his head, and looked at the ceiling. As a last resort, he held his nose and pinched it violently. It was no avail. He sneezed. A stifled, checked, emasculated sneeze, but a startling sound in the deadly quiet of the room. The stranger sprang round, and in the same minute Anthony acted. He flashed on his torch and jumped full for the stranger. In another minute they were down on the floor together. "Lights!" shouted Anthony. Virginia was ready at the switch. The lights came on true and full tonight. Anthony was on top of this man. Bill leant down to give him a hand. "And now," said Anthony, "let's see who you are, my fine fellow." He rolled his victim over. It was the neat, black-bearded stranger from the Cricketers. "Very nice indeed," said an approving voice. They all looked up, startled. The bulky form of Superintendent Battle was standing in the open doorway. "I thought you were in London, Superintendent Battle," said Anthony. Battle's eyes twinkled. "Did you, sir?" he said. "Well, I thought it would be a good thing if I was thought to be going." "And it has been," agreed Anthony, looking down at his prostrate foe. To his surprise, there was a slight smile on the stranger's face. "May I get up, gentlemen?" he inquired. "You are 3-1. Anthony kindly hauled him onto his legs. The stranger settled his coat, pulled up his collar, and directed a keen look at Battle. "I demand pardon," he said, "but I understand that you are a representative from Scotland Yard?" "That's right," said Battle. "Then I will present to you my credentials." He smiled rather ruefully. "I would have been wise to do so before." He took some papers from his pocket and handed them to the Scotland Yard detective. At the same time, he turned back the lapel of his coat and showed something pinned there. Battle gave an exclamation of astonishment. He looked through the papers and handed them back with a little bow. "I'm sorry you've been mishandled, monsieur," he said, "but you brought it on yourself, you know." He smiled, noting the astonished expression on the faces of the others. "This is my colleague we've been expecting for some time," he said. "Monsieur Lemoine of the Sûreté in Paris." All right, so we have come to the end of story time. And yeah, it looks like this is going to be a 5-part series as opposed to the 6 that I was thinking it might be. So, let's see. Do any of you have any suggestions of who we can raid? I'm going to go see who we've got. See who of our friends are streaming. Let's see. Ooh. Okay, yes, it is paused. Sleep raid. We've got Coffee with B. We've got Queer God. Let's see, Coffee is playing Animal Crossing. Queer is playing Apex Legends. It's Twiggy is playing Monster Train. And let's see. And then we've got, we can always do somebody new as well. We've got Midnight Lynx, Poke Ninja, Blondie, Nerdy Crafter. Ooh. Let's build a school district in Animal Crossing. So sorry. Midnight Lynx. Actually, let's go ahead and raid Queer, because I haven't raided her in a little while. Making some room here. Oops. It would be nice if I could spell. Okay, there we go. Getting our raid message ready. So this is the raid message I'm going to put up. So thank you again for joining me. I had fun. We had a lot. We made a lot of new friends today too. So thank you so much for all the follows, and thank you for the bits, Nin. And yeah, let's go ahead and raid. Next story time is going to be on Friday, 2 to 4. Unless I hear otherwise, somebody's going to try to get me fit in for vaccine. So it may be earlier, it may be later. We'll play it as it comes. So I will see you next time. Have a good week. Bye.